Mr. White and Herbert are playing on a competitive game of chess while Mrs. White knits by the fire. Their guest, Sergeant Morris, arrives. Mr. White, Herbert, and Mrs. White greet him at the door cheerfully. Mr. Morris tells the family stories about his travels in India and how he came to obtain the monkey's paw. He tells them that the paw can grant 3 wishes to 3 men. Herbert, mother, and father listen attentively. After explaining the paw's curse and the detriment it causes to the men who wish upon it, Mr. Morris throws the paw into the fire, but Mr. White grabs it hastily before it begins to burn. As Mr. Morris leaves, he warns the family of the consequences of wishing upon the paw. After Mr. Morris leaves, Herbert suggests that Mr. White wish for £200 to pay off the mortgage of his house. Mr. White wishes upon the paw. Then Herbert plays the piano loudly as the paw moves in Mr. White's hand, which startles him greatly.
The next day, Herbert says goodbye to his parents as he leaves for work at the factory. Later on, a man comes to their home and gives them the horrible news that Herbert died in a tragic accident and gives Mr. and Mrs. White a check for £200. The grieving parents have a funeral for Herbert.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
A week later, after the funeral, Mrs. White stands at her bedroom window one evening and in her grief begs her husband to wish Herbert alive again. Nothing happens at first, so they return to bed. After a couple of hours, they hear knocking at the door. Mrs. White rushes frantically to open the door as Mr. White finds the paw to make his final wish. The knocking stops. Mrs. White opens the door, falls on the floor, and wails in disappointment. Mr. White rushes to her side to comfort her in her grief.